Take a person, take a story, take you on a journey. It's your take.
A Your Take episode with a difference. Today I'm joined by a woman who comes from a background in comedy street theatre, where she had travelled the far corners of the globe. She has used her experience, skills, expertise and knowledge to form two businesses with her husband. The first, the Rare Species Theatre Company, and the second, Mojo Moves Comedy Dance Aerobics. My guest is known for playing the larger-than-life character, Cheryl Sprinkler. Cheryl, occasionally joined by her muse, Diante, is a fitness instructor and is seen wearing a neon leotard, leg warmers, a perm, and oversized specs. Today I'm joined by Ginny Adams. Ginny talks about her early years and a love for comedy and street performance, how she met her husband, forming her own businesses, working in the education sector and running classes for people living with MS, experiencing loss and tragedy, and what the future might hold. A very warm welcome. Good evening, Ginny Adams.
Good evening, hello.
You are on Your Take.
I am. Thanks for having me. Yes. What an intro.
A long introduction. And obviously we've got quite a lot to cover. And just from the introduction, we've established a love for creativity, street performance, comedy and performance, your entrepreneurial spirit and drive. But before we go down those avenues and find out more as well, can we go back to the beginning?
Yeah.
I'd like to go back to the roots, and I'd like to ask you where and when you were born. Can you describe your upbringing and tell us who your parents are, what they did for a living, and do you have any siblings?
So I was born in Hammersmith, London in 1971, and I was raised in quite a pleasant suburb in Richmond in Surrey, but we lived in the council houses. My dad was a librarian for places like The Guardian and the Financial Times. So he worked sort of in the collation of stuff. And my mum, at the time, had various jobs, actually. She worked really hard. She had sort of cleaning jobs, and then she went into sort of clerical work. So fairly ordinary background. But however, both those people hadn't followed their creative dreams, if you like. My dad was a fantastic drawer, had the most beautiful handwriting. He could play the guitar. He self-taught piano. He went and lived in Germany and Holland and learnt both languages. So he was trilingual. And my mum is a fantastic, beautiful singer. Oh, my dad had a beautiful voice as well. So my mum was brought up in the theatre. Her father ran theatres and clubs and pubs from the sort of 1950s onwards. So it's in the bones, it's in the blood. But yeah, I think my mum probably is a frustrated performer. She would have loved to have gone into something professionally, because when she was growing up, she was a fantastic dancer as well. But yeah, it's definitely always been a part of my personality from a very young age. I remember going up and finding clothes and putting on costumes of ordinary clothes, but I would become a different character and come downstairs and sort of, kind of entertain the family. Yeah. So yeah, that's the sort of background. I have siblings. I have an elder sister, Emma, and she's a painter. She's an artist. And my two younger brothers, half brothers, are fabulous musicians again. One of them is a Foley artist, so he's really into sort of sound technician stuff. And my other brother works for a charity in London but again, he's also in a band and makes music. So yeah, there's a definite creative streak through the family.
We've established so far that you grew up in the capital in the early 1970s. And interestingly, so far, we've already discovered you come from a creative background. It's in the DNA, not just your parents, but your siblings as well. Can we now move on to education and your schooling? I wanted to find out where you went to school, and do you have fond memories of your time there? What were your favourite subjects, and did you eventually progress on to further education?
So school was a funny one. I mean, primary school, it was okay. I put my head down and got on with it. Didn't particularly enjoy it. There was a bit of bullying, but they sort of would move between different kids. And then secondary school, Mum chose to send me to an all-girls school in Twickenham called Waldegrave. And my sister had been there previously when two separate girls' schools came together and became Waldegrave. My sister had gone to Twickenham Girls. And I found it quite a strange experience, really. It wasn't a particularly creative school. I guess I kind of became acquaintance to many, but I didn't have a huge set of really close friends. I always felt a little bit like an outsider, but I was kind of the class clown. I would play that card. I had the comedy to get me through things mostly, occasionally getting me into trouble, but actually I was clever enough to kind of get through without, and I got some O levels, and it was okay. It's not something I cherish. There was some kind of fairly odd practices, pretty old-fashioned way of schooling, really. But I guess subject-wise, funnily enough, I think I loved things like biology. There was one time I quite fancied being a forensic scientist. I was always into sort of a slightly dark side, I suppose. One of my cousins got me into horror films and stuff, and we used to watch the Hammer horror films, and I don't know, quite an odd mix. But always there was humour. There was always humour in our family anyway. We always had a good laugh, So I suppose that kind of got me through those years. Then my parents basically pulled the rug out from under me. Well, my mum and my stepdad, by that time, my mum and dad had split up, and dad had gone to live in Germany. That was when I was about 10. And by the time college years came, I'd got two places. I got a place at Richmond College and Hounslow College, going to be doing sort of TV and acting. And, it was kind of like a dream, because they hadn't offered drama at school. In fact, I'd done so badly at kind of school auditions that I'd only ever played a sort of part in the chorus. And I only got noticed because of my voice, my singing voice. I was picked out because they heard this member of the chorus playing one of the governors in Oliver. And they said, "Who's that singing? Who's that voice?" So, that was quite nice. But generally, I remember an English teacher laughing out loud when I said that I wanted to go into performing and acting. And luckily, she didn't put me off. But, that was the sort of thing you came up against in those days. Rather than someone encouraging you, she literally went, and walked off. It was like, okay, then. So parents moved me just at that point where you've made all your friends and you're going to move on to higher education or further education. They decided to move to the West Country. And at the time, my sister and I just were like, "What have you done? Why have you done this?" We just felt we'd been taken into this weird country bumpkin land of like really slow talking, and absolutely love it now, obviously. But back in the day, people said that we sounded like we'd come straight out of EastEnders, and we just thought, what, because where we came from, we actually were quite well spoken. And it was just quite a weird sort of like culture shock, really. But what that did was that got me to Bath College, where I took a performing arts kind of foundation. It was A-levels, but it was more than that. It was really creative, and got me into performing. And again, I was a model student, and I was picked out to work with the theatre company that I ended up working with for 28 years, you know. So it was kind of like, it was meant to happen. Yeah, I feel like it was the best thing that happened in the end. But at the time it was like, nah, this isn't right. So yeah, that's how I ended up in the West Country and performing with a street theatre, world renowned at the time, street theatre company. Yeah.
We've come on to the point of now living in the West Country, but I want to dig a bit deeper and find out a bit more about this love of creativity, but perhaps more importantly, this drive, this determination, despite the odds and despite at times in your educational years being told by people at the time not to pursue that career. I want to focus on the love of creativity and ask you, where do you think that love of comedy, performance and creation of characters, where do you think that comes from? And did you have any major influences growing up, even though you came from this very creative family background?
It's a really strange one, because I'd say my partner's got the same. It's like it's a part of me. Doing voices, when I tell stories, I'll do the voice of somebody who I met, or it's kind of just, it's who I am. It's like, if I hadn't, and I have had times where I've gone and got normal jobs, like working as an area manager, and when the creativity is crushed, and at one of the places that I worked, it really was, I was completely bound by the manager above me had no creativity whatsoever, so she wouldn't let go. She micromanaged, and I remember just coming home pretty much every day and kind of feeling sick to the stomach, because I wasn't doing what I really do feel is my sort of vocation. It's what I was put on this earth to do, is to make people feel better by making them laugh. And I don't know, it's gone beyond that now with Mojo Moves, because it is an actual physical sort of well-being thing. But it's really hard to sort of say that there was a sort of eureka moment that's what I wanted to do, and I'd seen somebody. As I say, I remember being about 8 years old and doing that, and I guess it sort of fed whatever, something in me having an audience and sort of feeding off that, but also this sense that if I could make people laugh, I could make them feel better if they were feeling rubbish. It's quite fairly deep, I suppose. from a really young age, it's okay, I'll make them laugh. So yeah,
I wanted to come on to the next chapter in your life, which is a very tragic and sad one, and that was losing your dad at a young age, when he took his own life. I wanted to ask you, what are your memories of your father, and can you recall your initial reaction when you heard about his loss?
Can I ever? He was amazing. He was amazing. He was the life and soul of the party. It's that classic, I guess you don't know what's going on inside someone's head, because the persona that he presented to the world was larger than life and full of life. And as I say, he wrote music, he wrote songs. He was living in Holland when he died, and he had a huge social circle, lots of things going on. He was I guess he was a very complex person, but yeah, I mean, I'm grateful for the time that I had with him in my life, but it still hurts that he's not here.
We all cope with loss and tragedy in our life in many different ways, and we all, I suppose, cope with it in a different way depending on who we are. But do you think his loss at such a young age, do you think that changed your perspective in life? Do you think it even maybe changed you as a person in any way?
I feel like it's taken me a long time to get back to who I am. I feel that I became quite an angry person. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it had a profound effect on my journey through life. But it's interesting because now I'm 51 now. It's a big old time, and it's been 25 years since he died. And yeah, I feel that there may be some things I did in my life that I wouldn't necessarily have stuck at or done had I not had that happen. I guess I could say that. But I've got no regrets. I've had a good life. And yeah, I feel like I've come back to the true me, sort of. It's taken a long time.
We move from your very fond memories and words of your dad and coping with that tragic loss at a young age. I want to look in more depth at your career. I'm obviously going to speak in some detail about your creative ventures, and you've already spoken about some of the areas you've worked in. But can you just discuss some of the areas you've worked in or delved in before establishing your own businesses? And can you tell us a bit more about your background in comedy street theatre?
Mm-hmm.
How did you get involved in this area? And can you tell us some of the places you've performed and travelled in the world?
Yeah, so as I said, when I was at college, there was a theatre company based in Bath that they were looking for students to be a part of a bigger performance. And I was a model student. I was an A student because performing is what I was meant to do. I've always got sort of, A's, I'm an A grade performer. It's like I don't want to say without any effort, because obviously I went to university and you've got to write your essays and all the rest of it and your dissertation, but it comes easily to me. It's
a natural academic, I guess.
Well, no, natural academic, yes, but I'm talking about the performance side of it. So yeah. I was always regarded quite highly by the lecturers. They knew that I had something, the thing, the gift, whatever, the X factor, the thing. So they recommended that I was taken on by this company just literally for a summer project. And it was only a couple of weeks. We went up to London and we performed at there's an arena near Liverpool Street Station called Broadgate. And it's kind of like City Bankers all the way around it, but they've got this big open circular area with benches around. People would come and have their lunches or whatever, with some steps going up. And it was a brilliant arena for some bonkers performances. That's what we do. We sort of had a theme, and then we would sort of populate this area with kind of odd characters who would interact and improvise. And that's the other thing, that's what I've always ended up doing, because I fell in with this company. It was all improvised. So we had a sort of loose structure and a scenario that we were working to, but everything that came out of your mouth, and not everything was verbal, a lot of the stuff was physical and kind of not mime, but mask work and stuff like that. So it was, you were thinking on your feet. You made something happen from nothing, and kind of that, I guess that's what stood me in good stead for moving on to what I do now. I'm really, I can pretty much keep something going. It's funny as myself, maybe not so. But yeah, if I'm a character, then I can pretty much create something out of nothing in an area, just by striking up a conversation with somebody. and listening to them and you know, banter back and forth, and it's that kind of thing. So,
And I
yeah,
believe that being part of a touring theatre company, you managed to see all sites and places around the world. And
we did.
Yeah.
We were so lucky. I mean, basically, the company, the characters that you used to do were quintessentially British, and I mean, you probably some of the things that, you know, the pomp that we saw at the weekend with the Queen's funeral, you know, we used to dress as beefeaters and stuff. We'd do sort of characters like that, very British, recognisable characters, but also based on various artists' work. So we used to do a lot of things with men in bowler hats. So I've dressed as a man quite a lot of my career as well, but a woman as well. So a lot of cross-dressing. But yeah, we would base something on Magritte's paintings. And yeah, it was really interesting because it wasn't just acting, it was art as well. But yeah, we ended up getting, because of this Britishness about us, we ended up getting a contract with British Council, and we were basically employed to go over to different events and I guess represent Britain in a fun and interesting way. So I've ended up going, I mean, I've been to 42 countries, I counted 42
wow,
countries.
that's incredible.
I know, not all of them through acting. My husband at the time enjoyed travel, so we used to go off, and sometimes we'd go for months at a time to India and you know, Asia and stuff like that. But through the company, I've been to Egypt, Kazakhstan, Nigeria, Venezuela. I mean, pretty much every continent. Some random backwaters that you just wouldn't imagine, and you certainly wouldn't imagine you'd see street theatre there. I mean, one of my sort of prevailing memories is being pushed through a Nigerian market in a wheelbarrow because I needed to get somewhere, and I got these guys. I said, "Can you give me a lift?" And all they had was a wheelbarrow, so I leapt in. You know, I mean, there's a lot of bravery as well. You know, I was putting myself at risk. I've jumped in the back of not moving vehicles, but say a vehicle's pulled up at some traffic lights, I've hopped in the back and then they drive off. And, you know, leaving the audience who's sort of followed me and followed this little story or whatever I've been doing, kind of going, you know, sort of shock and surprise. And, you know, but it's you work with what you've got. So you look for little opportunities to kind of create a little bit of theatre. I mean, obviously you jump out as quickly as you can when you get to the next set of traffic lights, but they don't see that, you know. So yeah, it was an exciting, it was good, really exciting, bonkers time, really. And yeah, I've been to China, Australia. Yeah, been very, very blessed in that way.
From traveling the globe with your street performance and theatre and magical moments and experiences that I could imagine you could share and write several stories, I want to now come on to someone in your life who's a key figure, and you've already mentioned already, and that's your husband, who, like yourself, has a love of performance, creativity. But can I ask how you met your partner? And can you describe his background and his interests?
So he is, so he's not actually my husband, he's my partner. So I was married, and I met Nelly, as he's known. His name's Neil, but he's known as Nelly fondly. I met him through the street theatre company. We met in about 1998, and we immediately clicked. But I was in a relationship, so we never, you know, very good. Even though actors have a bad reputation, nothing happened. But we, you know, we really got on. We just clicked. And unfortunately, he kind of ended up with a similar loss. He lost his dad a couple of years after I'd lost mine. So we kind of bonded through our grief, really. And then my life, you know, I decided I didn't want to perform as much, and I ended up moving to Bristol and kind of doing ordinary jobs. And so we kind of drifted apart. But then when my marriage had broken down, we ended up working together again, and kind of the rest is history. yeah, we ended up moving in together, and now we've got a 7-year-old son. So yeah, life took an unexpected turn, but very, very welcome, very, kind of long awaited. Yeah, it was something that, I think I'd thought about for a long time before it actually happened.
From relationships now to Ginny Adams, the businesswoman with an entrepreneurial spirit. But what made you decide to set up your own business ventures? And can you discuss the idea behind establishing the Rare Species Theatre Company and the work involved? And how did this idea evolve? And what made you decide to create Mojo Muse comedy, dance, aerobics classes?
Yeah, so basically, when I was doing the sort of ordinary work, I got proper into a full-time permanent job, and then an opportunity came up to travel to initially China for a month, and they gave me the time off to do that. And then I then got an opportunity about 6 months later to go to Australia for a month to perform. And the company that I worked for were like, we totally understand that's your first love, but we can't give you that time off. We've got a solution, and that's to get you to interview for a different role so that you basically have a month off between your jobs and you come back and you do this other role. Now, the other role turned out, it was called I was an area manager with charity shops. So I loved kind of secondhand stuff. I'd always got my costumes from charity shops. I knew I've got a really good eye for sort of antiques and things like that. So it was perfect role. Although not my absolute perfect role, as we've said. And then, this next job was called something like Schools and Festivals Officer or something like that. And it was my job to go into schools and talk to them about end of life care. It was a bit much, going into a primary school and talking about people dying. And and it just, because that wasn't my thing, I found it quite difficult. But also it was an extremely new role and it needed to establish. So lo and behold, not a very nice CEO came into force, and she basically made me redundant very quickly. So, the role, I didn't get a chance to kind of fill it out before this woman decided that it was the chop for me. So that kind of forced me to find something to do. And I was given a little bit of redundancy money, not very much, but enough for me to, at that point, set up a market stall selling vintage and secondhand clothes. And that's where I kind of got the idea that I could actually do it for myself, whereas before I'd been like, I was working for another theatre company. It wasn't, I wasn't brave enough. And I think something about Dad dying had robbed me of some of that bravery. So, because I remember it wasn't long after I graduated from university and I'd got a first class degree, and I was like, I'm going to have my own theatre company, and this is what's going to happen. And hey presto, a couple of months later I was just hit by massive grief.
I'd imagine as well that obviously dents your confidence as well, doesn't it? When you go through.
So I ended up going back. I ended up going back to the bosom of the company that I'd worked for. I felt safe there. So it kind of, I guess in a way, what happened with Dad kind of stunted my growth in a way. Because, it was like my confidence was knocked, and various things knock your confidence as well, relationships and all that sort of stuff. So I had this market stall, so I knew that I could run a business. And I've met some really great people. I ended up moving to Frome in Somerset, and I met some amazing people who encouraged the theatrical stuff. A particular woman called Kira Nolan, who used to work for EMI, and she has bands under her wing, and she's just a really good friend who just could see my potential and kind of, encouraged me to kind of go for it. So I think it was the Queen, one of the Queen's birthdays. Nellie and I ended up dressing as the Queen and Prince Charles for a sort of bit of a laugh. We'd already called ourselves Rare Species because when we worked in China, I dressed up as a panda, a human panda, a British panda, and we got them to write a sign saying "very rare species, British panda." So it kind of stuck. We came home and we were like, yes, we've got to create our own theatre company. It's just the two of us, called Rare Species. So that's how that kind of side of it started. But I didn't actually know what to do with it to make money and to kind of make it a going concern until I met somebody from Somerset Social Enterprise, I think it was. And she said, you need to become a community interest company. You can get grants and funding to do what you want to do. You can, work in your community and kind of use your theatrical skills to, do what you want. Because I'd mentioned this idea of setting up a fitness class, but just as a character, just because I'd had this notion. So it kind of was a while coming. It was like 2016 when we sort of started to do stuff as Rare Species, mostly unpaid at that point. And then it wasn't until 2018 that we got ourselves incorporated as a company. It's like, it was a huge learning curve for me. I had no idea. It was like, I don't even know what one of those is, not that I'm daft, but it hadn't even occurred to me that would be a way of kind of moving forward with it. And now we've been running for 4 years. 4 years of the Mojo Muse stuff anyway.
Ginny, I wanted to ask you, how did you become a qualified fitness dance instructor? And also talking about creation of a character, how did you go about creating the character Cheryl Sprinkler? And can you talk about the character and her origins? And can you also describe the character's personality, the clothes she wears?
Yeah.
And of course, her muse.
Tony Diante.
Tony Diante, yeah.
So I guess, the classic, when I thought about a fitness instructor, the classic was the 80s kind of aerobics instructor because they were so prevalent. It's a classic. If you say aerobics instructor, you come up with that image of someone with leg warmers and kind of bubbly perm. And, I then kind of put my extra kind of 80s bent on it back when I first started. So I had actual genuine 80s glasses that over the years, I've collected loads of props and glasses and shoes and handbags so that when I dress up, I can get a really good look. So that it's not, you don't think, that you might actually think, is that person dressed up, or are they, is that a real person, So it's kind of like you've got this slight like not, uncertainty about it, but in a good way, it makes you feel it makes you notice them, Anyway, she's kind of developed a little over the time. I think she's got a little more glamorous and a slightly more shaggy perm. The glasses don't go on as often. Because it came apparent that people thought I was a granny. Sort of in the early stages, there were people like, oh God, I've seen photos of her. It's that granny and it was like, it was never meant to be a funny old lady dancing scenario. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like I've ended up getting more modern costumes. I mean, these days there are so many people making bodysuits and cat suits for festivals and stuff that there's kind of like designs, of different stuff. So I've kind of gone a little down the slightly, I spent most of my life making myself look unattractive. So, it was kind of, I'm allowed to feel that I look a little bit glamorous now, even though I'm sweating. So that was kind of, the start of it. We actually applied to the town council here in Frome for a pot of money called the People's Budget. And it was only a small fund that we went for. And we were going to basically do fun aerobics in the centre of town and get the public to join in. I think it ended up being sort of the bigger council put the kibosh on it, saying that it was we'd end up causing accidents because we were in neon in the street. Anyway, so it kind of didn't happen, but anyway, that was way back, and then it kind of just developed, and people took Cheryl into their hearts, and we got some lottery funding. That's how I got my qualification. I got some lottery funding to get the qualification, because it was like 600 quid, you know, to spend out, which we didn't have. So I did take quite a long time doing it, because the sort of pandemic hit and I still hadn't quite qualified. But anyway, I am qualified now, and I've since got a further qualification in health referrals, so that I can work safely with people with, long-term health conditions. And yeah, hopefully that'll open a few doors as well. So yeah, it's kind of like personal development. It feels good to sort of have another skill under your, because people always assume that actors aren't very skilled, but actually, there's a lot of stuff that goes on that you don't know, yeah.
Ginny,
I think I've answered, yes.
Ginny, can I get you to describe the Mojo Muse classes and what they involve? And can you talk about the reaction to the fitness classes, your relationship with the people you instruct, and what motivates you to do what you do?
So Mojo Moves is all about getting your mojo back. So the most important thing is that people feel good about themselves when they're doing it, when they finish doing it. So it's not just a case of doing a bog standard aerobics class. There's a lot of drama that goes into it. There's a lot of choreography and what I call backing dancer moves. So you get to sort of release a sort of part of you that you may not have kind of connected with for a long time, because basically when you reach a certain age, there aren't many places that you can go dancing without feeling like a bit of an idiot. I mean, there's no clubs are rotten anyway. I mean, even when you're growing up, it's like, oh, is this the place we've got to go to have a dance or a rave or whatever? And people should dance. Dancing is so good for the soul, and so many people are embarrassed by it, and it is that we don't have a place to do it, and we also don't have great traditional dances, really. I mean, if you think of our sort of Morris dancing, yeah, it's great fun, a bit of hopping and throwing your hankies in the air. But, some countries absolutely, at a wedding, you see these amazing, all the men getting together and doing these sort of amazing sort of step dances that they've learnt for years, and kind of that tradition. And yeah, we're a bit more uptight about it. So I kind of wanted to create a place where people could go and kind of, just kind of let go, really, and not think about the fact that they were doing any exercise. I mean, that's a massive key as well, is I call it sort of exercise by stealth, because, you don't realise you've danced for 45 minutes and, worked up a sweat, but it doesn't feel like you've been forced to sort of do 100 press-ups or whatever, and the other thing is I use, there's a lot of reminiscence. It's about looking back at a time, reminding you of maybe better times, not necessarily, but, kind of reconnecting people with themselves. So, memory helps you to do that if you're thinking about stuff. And I use things like TV theme tunes from back in the day and adverts, TV adverts, still getting people to do dance to them or do squats to them or whatever it is. I mean, this week we did there's the Close Encounters classic. If you listen to the John Williams full number, the mothership comes in and it sounds a lot like farting. So I get my ladies to do the squats in time to the farting. And of course, the whole place erupts in laughter, and it's silly and it's childish. I know, it's puerile. But, people do laugh, and they lose their inhibitions, because without alcohol, it's a sober sort of bonkers thing.
It's interesting how you talk about laughter and dance almost as therapies and being therapeutic. And I kind of feel the same with singing, in a way that I would have loved to have been a musician, and I can't sing for toffee probably, but for me, I enjoy just singing to a backing track.
Yeah.
Almost because in a different lifetime, I would have loved to have been on stage. I probably wouldn't sing in front of anyone, but it's something I kind of find Yeah,
Well,
it lifts me up. It puts me in a good spirit.
there's I mean, obviously there's the whole endorphins thing, you know. If you exercise, you release all those sort of feel good hormones. But actually singing's an interesting one, because that actually activates the vagus nerve, which is one of your cranial nerves that goes down, and it is basically it controls the functions such as breathing and heart rate. And so singing is good for that. It kind of will calm you down. The experience of singing, the actual physical doing of singing, will actually activate this basic parasympathetic nervous system, which is the nervous system that calms you down. So normally when you say you're going to stimulate something, you assume that means, you know, making you feel crazy or whatever. But if you stimulate that nerve, it actually will bring your heart rate down and will ease anxiety and stress. So it's interesting, that one. And I'm working on that sort of stuff at the moment. That's the other thing I do. I don't just do a session of hard and fast aerobics and forget everything else. We've got some rituals that we do. One of them is reaching up to the universe, because Cheryl always says about, you know, reaching up to the universe, finding your mojo and giving it a tickle. It's up there, it's yours for the taking. And you bring a bit down, and then you make contact with your body and you actually feel your body. Because as adults, or probably as children, we don't actually feel our own bodies. You know, we're kind of taught to allow someone else to feel our bodies for gratification purposes. But you know, we don't actually feel up, you know, and that kind of action will ground you and will make you feel much more secure and present, you know, and not be sort of thinking about what's worrying you about the future. You know, you are there in the moment, all that sort of mindfulness. I mean, that again, what I do takes people back, but also somehow brings them right into the present moment. Because also they've got to follow my quite fast dance moves. So some people have said, oh, I don't think of anything else when I come to your class, like in a good way. You know, she might have just had a massive argument with one of her teenage kids. There's one lady that comes and she quite often says, oh my God, you know, having this thing going on. And by the end of it, she says, oh, thank you so much. I feel so much better, because all that has gone.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we have these little rituals. We throw away psychological rubbish, you know, and actually physically throw it as a group. And then we do some breathing exercises. So, yeah, it's a lot more complex than I think people probably give it credit. And in some ways, I wonder if by giving it the handle of comedy, I've kind of done it a disservice, because it's way more than just some idiot in a costume jumping about, you know. There's a lot of thought.
Interestingly, I want to talk about the work you've done in the educational sector, performing to primary children, school leavers and young adults with additional needs. What made you decide to work in this area? Can you talk about your experiences to date and their reaction to your work?
Yeah, I'm trying to think how that, I know how it started. Okay, so the town council were running a thing called the School Travel Challenge, where basically they want to encourage children and their families to walk to school and not use public transport, but not use cars. So they can scoot to school or jog to school or walk in a crocodile or whatever. But basically, again, that sort of green focus, you know, the town is very much about kind of trying to bring down the carbon emissions and all that sort of stuff. So that was probably way back before lockdown. I think we might have a little moment. My son's just about to go to bed. But yeah, basically they got me into the schools. So that was my foot in the door. And the kids absolutely went crazy for it. I was just running sort of 20-minute sessions. I obviously slightly tempered what I do with the adults. You know, it wasn't quite so cheeky. But they, you know, they know a lot of the old songs for a start. They know a lot of the songs that I do. And the repertoire is now vast. because some of the films, if you go and see things like the Minions movies, because I've got a 7-year-old, I know about all these films, and they've got these sort of wide-ranging musical soundtracks from 60s through to 80s through to, so my son knows quite a lot of the tracks anyway. So these kids were like, really loving just, and it, she's larger than life. She goes in, it's vibrant, it's colourful. You remember being at school, maybe in a theatre company, or someone would come in, from outside, and not a teacher. It was really like, and now I go into those schools and it's like, Mojo Moves is here, Mojo Moves, It's funny, the other day, back in, I think, June, just before Glastonbury, Paul McCartney came and played at our local venue.
Oh, yeah, of course, he played at the Cheese and Grain, didn't he?
Which is where I actually do my classes on a Tuesday night. So I actually stand on the same, or Paul McCartney stood on the same stage as me. But my partner and I were running a silent disco that very evening, and we just happened to drive through the car park of the Cheese and Grain. And this little girl, all the adults were waiting. They'd been waiting for hours for Paul McCartney to arrive. And this little girl saw me in the car and went, "It's Mojo Moves, it's Mojo Moves." For all the people waiting for Macca, I still got my little moment. So and they ask for my autograph and stuff at some of the schools. It's bonkers. Yeah.
That's great.
Cheryl. One girl said to me, "Cheryl, you're my absolute idol," like that. I was like, okay. Yeah, it's really sweet. Yeah, I've got a little bit of, I did have a bit of celebrity status, local celebrity status. People know who I am if they see me. If I go out dressed up around town, they're like, "Cheryl," but they don't come to my classes necessarily, and that's what I need.
From signing autograph books, selfies, photo opportunities, and sharing the stage with Paul McCartney, we now come on to television.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm interested to ask you this because you played the Queen and Prince Charles on the popular talent TV show Britain's Got Talent.
We did.
What made you decide to apply to be on the programme? And why have you described it as an experience you'd rather forget?
Okay, so we didn't apply. We were talent hunted, or whatever they call it. They had these, I can't remember what they're called now. Scouts, I guess.
Yeah, talent scouts.
Yeah, I guess it was talent scout. And looking back and looking at the footage of what they must have seen, that this video that we did, we basically, that very first time that we went out as the Queen and Prince Charles, we were literally just mucking about at a street party with friends. We weren't being paid to perform. We didn't think we looked necessarily massively like them. It was just a bit of fun. And, looking back, my costume, I'd be like, oh, mortified. So we think, looking back, that they must have seen that and thought, right, these are a couple of doozies. We're going to get them on. We're going to stick them on the stage. We're going to humiliate them. And we're going to get Stephen Mulhern to have them in the studio later and take the mickey. What they didn't say that we couldn't change our costumes or anything like that. So that what they didn't bank on was me actually really studying the Queen and getting a much, much better costume together. And both of us, rehearsing loads. And we basically, did this skit. So they called us a dance act. I mean, it was ridiculous. We never purported to think that we really looked like them. That's never what we intended to do. We had a sort of likeness that could go up to people and have a conversation as if you were talking to the Queen. It was slightly irreverent and, cheeky. And, then she might bust out some moves if there was some music playing, just because that's what I did. So it was never, we never sort of said, this is our act and we're really proud of it and this is what we do. So anyway, we went in this much better costume. We ended up, everyone who met me as soon as I arrived was calling me Mom on the audition day. And we went on stage and we got a standing ovation on the stage at the Palladium. They loved it. And you can see in the video when there is some footage still, because they completely chopped up. They changed our music when they showed it on TV. They cut out all the funnies that I did when I was talking to Amanda. I was interviewed by Amanda at the beginning as the Queen. And you can see David look at Simon and basically go, like, what we're gonna, you can tell they thought we were gonna, they've been basically primed that we were going to be rubbish, and then we got this standing ovation because we weren't actually rubbish. And you can see this sort of look between them. Anyway, we got 4 yeses. We got through to the other bits. Then we actually saw what came out on TV, and I got a bit cross and probably had a little bit too much wine. And I got on social media and I put, you know, this is what you look like when they change your music. And I'd done some weird sort of filter on. Anyway, it kind of ended up that they kind of got in touch and said that I shouldn't have said anything. And, you know, I got a bit of a slap on the wrist, but no further action was taken. But including no bookings, no nothing. We got nothing out of that. Just a bit of humiliation because what they put on the telly was not what we actually put on the stage.
One last question before we move on about that experience or that incident. Interestingly, I spoke to a guest whose life was changed by being on that program. For you, it was obviously a different experience. Did you feel kind of personally disappointed with the outcome, and also the fact that you are a creative person and that somebody or a TV company, if you want to put it that way, have literally taken your act and pretty much destroyed it in, you know, when it comes to the edit?
So that would have been 2017. So Rare Species, we kind of started doing stuff about 2016. Britain's Got Talent 2017. I ended up not performing for a year after that. Yeah. I felt I was embarrassed. I wanted to hide under a rock. Yeah. It had a terrible effect, really.
Pretty
you
much
know,
not your confidence.
Not the confidence, absolutely. And you know, you sort of think you think about those people that get put on there who maybe have learning difficulties, because they quite often, you see those people that go and audition, and you think, you know, when they're then sent to the ITV2 show, and it's all like taking the mickey for you know, entertainment's sake. Yeah, it's a shame. Yeah, it's a funny old thing, and it's so orchestrated. I mean, I'm glad the person you spoke to, their life was changed from it, but they know who's going to win before you step on that stage, for sure. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't believe that people vote, and it's, you know, it's very much a pathway for some people. They're headhunted, and they're, you know, I don't think I don't think it's what it's supposed to be. I don't believe that it's a true talent show that the British population decide who's talented and who's not. And I'm not saying we went on there and gave the best performance of, you know, a talent show and showed our true talent. It was just to sort of, we kind of got, wrapped up in the kind of excitement of being asked to go on telly and that sort of stuff, you know. So yeah, with hindsight, I probably wouldn't do it again.
A good point, I think, to move on and come back to your business ventures. Do you have any long-term plans to develop or expand on your current ventures? And are there any creative areas you'd like to work in outside of comedy and acting?
So I do enjoy writing. I mean, it probably would be comedy. I can't help myself, you know, that's kind of my style. I'd quite like to do voiceover work. I'd quite like to do, but then that's comedy and acting. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think it is a good idea for me not to do something creative as a job. Yeah, I'd struggle. Yeah, I have to find something. It has to make my heart, you know, I have to enjoy what I'm doing for a job, I think.
Sounds a crazy idea, but currently you have Cheryl Sprinkler and the aerobics dance classes. Is there any chance that she could maybe form some sort of band, maybe some musical endeavour?
Oh, I'd love to. I have thought about starting doing karaoke as her, or doing karaoke but manned as a character, sort of developing that. But yeah, band would be good. The other thing is a TV little slot on telly, the classic, fitness in the morning with Cheryl.
Maybe an interview show like this one, but as her.
Okay, I'll come back. Totally up for that, James.
Her as the interviewer, not the interviewee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there is all that stuff. I feel like I'm missing a trick with like YouTube, having a channel and doing some stuff. I mean, there's so many characters as well. The other thing is Cheryl's kind of taken over in a way, and because Mojo Moves was always meant to be the sort of bread and butter, because I could run classes and have a sort of income from it. The other stuff's gone by the wayside, and we did a really funny walk of the town as these two characters, Virginia Saggers and Gerald Turd, and they were like historians, but I've got these terrible saggy boobs and like half moon glasses, like a history teacher from back in the day, or a supply teacher. Just kind of strange characters. Those people that do take you on a tour of some random city that you might decide to go on a walking tour of the city, and it's some volunteer, and that's who she became. But that gained a little bit of a cult following. That was great, but we never kind of pushed it any further, so we kind of only did it a few times, and we never got any funding to kind of make it bigger and better. And it's done now. It's like because the pandemic hit, it's 2 or 3 years since we wrote it, and it was relevant. I mean, it would still be relevant, but I don't think my partner's not into doing it so much. So it's kind of like we're having to look for other stuff. But I would like to sort of put on big community theatrical happenings in the town. I think it's ripe for that. We've got such a brilliant town in terms of higgledy-piggledy lanes and alleyways and stuff, that you could sort of turn it into this quite strange, surreal kind of, turn another corner and there's something random happening from a balcony or, upper window, and just, I could see my imagination running riot. I might do it yet. It might happen.
Shortly, Ginny, we move on to that moment, the final questions that we ask every single Your Take guest, the same ones. So I'll reveal them very shortly. But finally, let's steer away from your busy, creative working life. You're a mother, as we've established, and a family woman. But can you tell us a little bit about your son, and what are your interests and hobbies away from creativity?
So we love bird watching. Okay, so my son is called Buddy. He's 7. He's got beautiful long blonde hair. He's amazing. He's really funny. He does funny voices. He's definitely got the same gene as me and my partner. And we love nature. We love going for walks. We love playing the Wii. We've got an old Wii. So we do a bit of bowling. Love trampolining. There's a trampoline place in Bath we like to go to. It's quite a lot of Minecraft gets played without mummy, I will say.
Yeah, my kids are obsessed with Minecraft.
Yeah,
they've never played it, but they just watch these YouTube videos.
Yeah, that's exactly what. Yeah. But he follows the tutorials. He's built some pretty amazing things off the back of those tutorials, actually. There's a bit, the old screen time tussle. Tablet, screen. He sort of multitasks. It's like, we've got to turn that off and do some drawing. Yeah, so we all like drawing. We like playing board games. It's all right being there. It's all right. Yeah. Do a bit of baking every now and then, if I remember to be a mum. Classic, get the apron out, No, I like cooking. I like cooking nice home meals and all that. Yeah, we go off to the seaside in the summer. Yeah, he loves a bit of sea swimming. He's just having swimming lessons. No, that's mine. Swimming lessons. So yeah, got some nice friends. Yeah, it's all good.
From it's being all right to hopefully these will be all right questions.
Okay.
We ask every single Your Take guest these final questions to wrap up the interview.
Okay.
Maybe establish things we haven't learned about them in the last 60 minutes. You don't need to think about these in any great depth.
Okay.
They're quick fire questions. Here we go, Ginny Adams.
Okay.
Number one, what is your favorite pastime?
Dancing. Yeah.
From dance moves now to cinema. What would you say is your favorite film and why?
There is a film called A Matter of Life and Death with David Niven. I don't know if you've heard of it or seen.
I'm a massive fan of the director, Michael Powell. He's my all-time favorite British director.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So have you seen that film?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know why my sister and I watched it when we were quite young, and it sort of stuck with us really. And it's funny how life sort of turned out, but that whole it's quite surreal as well. The film it's more than just a Technicolor movie. In fact, it goes between Technicolor and black and white. And then there's that funny little Frenchman that comes out, and the smell of onions when he appears. And did you know that if people, when they're going to have an epileptic fit, apparently smell onions? There's a thing.
No, I never knew this.
So I wonder if that's what he was getting at when he, not that that's anything relevant, but I don't know. It's captivating somehow, and it's sort of tragic, but it's just quite beautiful, that film. Yeah.
True. I think that's a great choice, an interesting one.
But I love Rear Window as well.
Another great film.
Yeah.
I love Michael Powell films. I think that's a great choice. And the colour stock in that film and all of his films, The Red Shoes is another one. It's just absolutely incredible.
I didn't know that was him. Yeah. It is that. It's got a slight green tinge, hasn't it? All of it.
It almost doesn't look real. It almost looks created in a way. It just doesn't look like, I don't know how to explain. It just
almost like it's been painted. Well, is that technical? Did they sort of paint it on afterwards?
It
was quite a painstaking thing. Yeah.
We go from films now to novels. Who would you say is your favourite novelist?
That's a tricky one. I'm really rubbish at reading. That's bad, isn't it?
I'm the same. I rarely read, which is terrible.
When I do read, it makes me go to sleep really quickly. It's like from revising for things. I remember I used to try and revise for school exams and stuff, and I would always fall asleep, like after about 3 pages like that. So it's like a cut-off mechanism. It's some sort of cut-off thing in my brain going, no, this isn't happening. But I would say, is it... I want to say Hanif Qureshi, The God of Small Things. I probably got it up there.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at... I'll tell you who I used to like as well. The old Armistead Maupin, the old Tales of the City, but they're all, it's a bit risque. That's sort of pulpy fiction. But I would say The God of Small Things was a book that I really loved. And I should reread it because I've completely forgotten what it was about.
Ginny,
yes.
Next, if you could have had a different profession, what would it have been?
I'm really loving the idea of sort of design, graphic design. I do really enjoy and calligraphy and lettering and sign writing. If I could learn how to do that, really beautiful, and those kind of the stuff you see on like the steam fair, that kind of traditional fairground sign writing.
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, design, graphic design, yeah, using those sort of skills. The quieter, the stuff that's completely not hello, you know. Sometimes I crave that, I think. Yeah.
Interesting choice. Next, who in life would you say has been your greatest inspiration?
Ooh, I don't know. I mean, it's a hard one because my mum's amazing, and she's been through a lot of not great stuff and come out the other side, and she's always there for us. She's amazing. She's yeah, she's amazing. But she's not inspirational in the way that she's been very selfless. She hasn't followed her dreams, and you know, she's always been our mum. So to stick at that and never complain about that, always just say that we're, you know, what she was here for, kind of thing. And you know, really, that she's missed out on some stuff. So she's, yeah, that's, I'd say mum's up there. But yeah, it's a difficult one. Don't know, like famous people. I like the Dalai Lama. I like the way he always laughs his way through most things, doesn't he? You see him interviewed, he's like that. And you just think, oh yeah, brilliant. I feel that way.
I saw him once actually when I was on holiday. He went to Memphis.
How weird.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
I've been to Memphis.
He came out in the street and got out of his chauffeur, I think it was, and let people take photos, and it was,
I saw him he drove past. I went to India and we went up to Dharamsala, which is where he lives in exile, isn't it? Dharamsala, up at the top. It's above Delhi, sort of in the foothills of the Himalayas. Quite an amazing place. And he arrived, you know, he drove through and there were people waving sort of Tibetan flags. So I saw him like fleetingly in a car it's probably quite a fancy Range Rover or something, you know. Dalai Lama. All right then. Nice wheels, mate.
From the Dalai Lama to newspapers.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Coincidence. But what do you read a newspaper? And if so, which one?
I don't really, but I mean, I certainly would be drawn more to the left-wing papers, The Guardian, The Independent, is it? I don't even know if that's left wing.
Yeah,
but yeah,
daily, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't really. I mean, there's some old crap in there that gets put out there. You know, I really rate the Liverpudlians, the Scousers, for banning the Sun. You know, or is it Manchester? No, it's Liverpool, isn't it?
It's Liverpool.
Yeah.
Or to do with Hillsborough, wasn't it?
Yeah. And just, you know, the classic, the rubbish that gets put out in the Express. The Express always talks about heat waves that never come. They always do. They always put, you think you see this, something about a heat wave, and you can guarantee that it's the Express. Daily Mail, you know, just nasty, bigoted, as far as I'm concerned. But funny enough, going back to the old Britain's Got Talent, it was the Mail on Saturday, or might have been the Mail on Sunday. They wanted us, we had to do a photo shoot. So I've ended up being in a colour supplement.
Oh, right. Okay.
We've got that in a cupboard somewhere. Terrible cock's leg queen. Awful. Fucking hell. What was I thinking? Excuse my language. But geez, Louise. Oh, yeah, those were funny days.
From being on a Daily Mail spread next to your favourite food, Ginny, what would you say is your favourite food?
Cheese.
Okay.
Cheese. Pizza. Yeah, savoury food. Actually, one of my favourite things in the world is just a jacket potato with butter and black pepper. Really simple. But I love good food. I've got a part-time job in a really lovely local restaurant that does some of the best food in Frome.
Ah.
win-win situation. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
You've touched upon the Dalai Lama, but who would you say is your favorite cultural icon?
Cool.
A lot of people that we've asked this question to have struggled. It could be maybe a political figure from history, a designer, inventor, maybe a scientist, someone who's changed the world or the perception, the way we see the world.
Yeah.
Could be a religious leader.
I suppose for their living through quite tragic circumstances, I would say this lady up here is Frida Kahlo.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's pretty amazing. Trying to think of someone closer to home, really. Oh, it's a tricky one.
Do you want to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
From cultural icons
Yes.
to favorite curse words. What is your favorite curse word and why?
Oh, I'm terrible. I shouldn't curse, but I do use a lot. I do swear quite a bit, more than I, mean to, really. And I don't necessarily use my favourite ones. Do you know? I quite like a bollocks or a balls.
First time it's been chosen.
First time.
Yeah, normally people say the F word.
Well, I kind of that's a bit overdone, isn't it? People sprinkle that in all the time, don't they? But a good ball sacks or something.
You've been seen, travelled and performed in many places around the world, but what would you say is your favourite place or holiday destination?
I would say in terms of a holiday destination, somewhere hot and lovely, like Greece, the Greek islands, or even places like Croatia have got some beautiful places to go and just completely relax and chill out. But the place I really loved when I went to visit it, and this is good probably 20 years ago, so it's probably changed quite a bit, although it probably hasn't changed that much, is Laos, which is
near
Vietnam and
yeah.
Thailand. Yeah. Quite a small country, a lot of French influence in the capital, and so they've got those 2CV cars and all that kind of, you see, like, and they sell baguettes and red wine in the middle of this Southeast Asian place with all these like Buddhist monks, and just seeing Buddhist monks. We went up it must have been the Mekong. It took 2 days to get from this one place, and it was a boat with no food on board and just a hole at the back to go to the toilet. And some of these tourists have got on this boat with no knowledge that that's what it was going to be like. So they literally had a packet of biscuits or something, thought that there'd be a bar and a cafe and all the rest of it. But it was literally a wooden boat with benches down the side. And it took, 2 days to get to our destination, and with one stopover. And we arrived in pitch darkness at this stopover. But it was an intriguing place. It was really gentle, and I did enjoy that place.
Ginny, we now come on to music.
Yes.
Who would you cite as your favourite music artist, and what's your favourite album?
So I would say I really love Elbow, and the reason that I love Elbow is because that was the cementing music that brought me and Nelly together. After some times where we'd kind of almost come together and then not got together, and he basically started to lend me CDs to play in the car. It was a fairly long time ago. There probably was better technology, but we were still using CDs. And at the time I had a job in a cafe in Box, just outside of Bath. which is near the recording studios, isn't it? Peter Gabriel.
Yeah.
New World Studios, I think it's called. Bloody hell, if Mark Potter, the guitarist from Elbow, didn't come in and I made him a bacon, lettuce and tomato sandwich, swear to God, had the CD in my car, and it was a little cafe. So I literally went, I've got the CD in my car, went and got it and asked him if he would sign it. And he took it, and it didn't come back for ages. And then about 3 or 4 weeks later, a guy who worked at the studios said, "Oh, I've got something for you." And they'd signed it to Neil. They'd signed it to my partner, the whole band. Yeah. So I would say The Seldom Seen Kid by Elbow is one of my favourite records. It's got Starlings on it. It's got, I think it's got One Day Like This, that's classic. I love doing that in Mojo. You can really throw your arms wide. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I love them. And we saw them at Glastonbury the year we properly got together. We saw them live, and it had been really raining, and then the sun suddenly, that amazing sky where the clouds just let all the sort of sunbeams come out, happened above the stage. And so they're a really important part of our history.
And Ginny, the last two questions. The first one, what is your greatest achievement to date?
Gosh, I've probably forgotten what. There's probably a really good one. I got a first class degree, so I was quite chuffed about that. And I wrote a dissertation that got AA plus. Oh no, double plus. It was like really ridiculous. Like the woman who marked it has basically said it was at a level where you could use it as a textbook for students. So it was kind of like, wow. Yeah, so that was quite mind-blowing. Because it was on the most random subject. That's probably why no one else had written about it before. Sound text art. The sort of thing where people write poems in a circle, and that kind of informs how it's read and maybe how it's performed. So it was sound text art for performance. So you could take a script, take a text, and if it was laid out in a certain way, you could use that to inform how you would actually perform that text. So that was what I was writing about.
And then, Ginny Adams.
Yes.
How do you wish to be remembered?
As a kind, considerate, good egg, nice person. And good fun, helpful. Yeah, all those things.
Ginny Adams, that is the final question and at the end of tonight's Your Take.
Thank you very much.
Firstly, thank you for taking part.
No
it's been an interesting interview and experience, and the whole purpose of Your Take is to take someone's perspective about their career or the journey they've gone through from their early years, their upbringing to the present. Thanks for taking part. Thanks for being so honest.
Thanks
There's
for having
been
me.
obviously some moments in the interview that have been a little bit more difficult with tragedy that we've spoken on, but also a lot of highs in your career with what you're doing, your ventures, the comedy, the performance, the dancing, the fitness instructing. I wish you all the best with all your endeavours, whatever they might be. Obviously, your son's future as well. And thank you for being a guest on Your Take.
Thanks for having me.